especially for founders. I can guarantee one thing about your business. I can't guarantee you'll be successful. I can't guarantee where you should spend the money, but I guarantee there are at least three things you are fundamentally wrong about in your business today.
Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. On today's pod, we have Kurt Uhlir, the king of scaling businesses, a globally recognized speaker, podcaster, 10x marketer, and has taken startups from 0 to 500 million. We're going to get in depth today on the actual tactics that he's used, the strategy, the perspectives he approaches every new startup, every new business that he touches with. Kurt, thank you for taking the time to join the show today.
Hey, Jason, thank you for having me.
Awesome. It's my pleasure. Been looking forward to it and thought we'd kick things off with your story, your background, before getting into the nitty gritty in terms of the world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my background, it's not too different than what a lot of people is. I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we started something small, how do you resell candy and things? But by the time I started 14, I was hiring enough friends in two different businesses. The government was going to force me to file pay for payroll taxes. And so I had to form two LLCs at 14. And so one of those ended up being a pretty sizable lawn care and pressure washing business. I actually sold when I went to college for a great six-figure send off to college kind of thing. But that started what I didn't realize at the time, which was this path towards being really good at scaling and operations. I have 15, 20 years at this point of really high tech experience, but I still do dabble in other industries from a more of an advisor perspective or sometimes an advisor perspective, but I'm kind of industry agnostic. I'm on my second hypergrowth company. And so we may talk a little bit about that, but I think I've uncovered some ways to help grow any business and help them work through the inflection points so that if you're growing at 2%, we can make you to go to 20%. If you're growing at 20%, how do we find ways you might be able to be growing at 200 to 2,000% per year? And so it's a fun place to be, both with the teams I've helped grow, but also hearing other people's stories that implement this.
Absolutely. Paying taxes at 14. Haven't heard that one directly on the show. I've heard about the candy sales, and like you said, a lot of overlaps there. You've probably worked with entrepreneurs in a variety of different verticals, spectrums, and companies that need that high growth. Where do you make the distinction from revenue, sales and marketing? How do you look to have those ideas bounce off each other versus against each other? And really, where does the conversation start as you enter a project, a new project? What do you want to be able to throw on that whiteboard first?
Yeah, well, for me, where I tend to come in and help is after there's been product market fit. And so that's usually going to be a little bit more sizable companies. Where I joined full time during the time, it's going to be at an established company. I mean, $100 million in revenue or more usually for myself. But I'm happy to advise and coach companies that are smaller, but really it kind of falls into two areas there. There's those both very early, it's almost just the idea. It's that startup entrepreneur type of thing. And there's no cost for things. I tend to usually just have time with people. And I think my best power is being able to help people say, this is a dumb idea. Don't do this here, and point people away from that. And a lot of times you think it's a great idea, but friends and family don't want to tell you that sometimes. And so asking questions, I think helping people uncover that. Where I found that I can help companies, or I could start something myself, I'm really not good personally at that 0 to 1 million kind of time frame. There's a place for that, but my advice tends to be it overwhelms founders a lot of times, and I don't enjoy it. And so I do believe it's not just where you're passionate about. I think you should become passionate about where you're really good. And so I'm not passionate about that, finding that initial product market fit. I'm passionate about taking something that has that fit and scaling it. So coming out with something that's not always like a sexy product, but like one of the products in a portfolio I'm managing now helps real estate agents with referrals to other agents. It's kind of like not cool technology in a way, but I'm going to see 26,000 agent referrals take place in the first year of that product. Like, that's just mind blowing, from going from nothing to 26,000 internal referrals. That's what excites me. And it's not like cool technology. Now I'm working on some patent pending technology. And so that's where I kind of draw my personal distinction about where do I get started. But I think also what maybe is underneath your question, which is where should other people think about scaling? When you're getting started, when you have a little bit of product market fit, you should be doing unscalable thing to get your repeat customers, to get your lighthouse customers. Heck, if you need to dress up in a gorilla suit and go stand on the corner with a sign to get somebody to use your SaaS product, like you can do that when you're pre-revenue, when you're at $1 million ARR and you're trying to find some new customers. That's great. You should never do that as a founder when you have $5 million, $10 million of revenue. And so like, that's where I think people should think about, if you don't have that repeat sales process, that product market fit, do anything you can to get people to use your product. And after you have that, now you start thinking about scaling.
Absolutely. So as you said, a lot of the times that 0 to 1 million, you're hearing from friends, family, first screen networks. You may not be hearing the things you need to hear, more of what they think you want to hear.
Right.
You're far more impactful once it gets past that. But once the product market fits there, perhaps it's that $100 million plus company and being able to take things to the next level from there. What does marketing look like in that discussion? We're working with a lot of groups that are below that, some above.
Yeah.
But what does marketing look like to take it from, let's say, 100 million to 200 million? What does that dynamic, what does that plan entail?
I mean, a lot of times it's really not different than when you're at 5 million and trying to grow from there. I mean, there used to be the day where you could almost browbeat customers into coming and using your product or services because you just hit them with advertising and just repeat and repeat. And there's a place for that. There's nothing wrong with actually kind of selling fire insurance. And we've got some stories about that we can share. But there's nothing wrong with pay-per-click ads. But if you really want to grow something at scale, whether it's $100 million or you're at $2 million sales, people always need to be looking at marketing now about what's the short-term versus the longer-term investment. And especially in the longer term, it's looking at how do we influence customers? How do we tell customer success stories and superhero stories where it's about the customers that are using your products and services and not about yourself. That even applies if you're like an individual real estate agent. Like, are you the best agent helping people buy luxury condos in your market? Yes. But there's only so much of that. There's only usually one person in the area that can kind of have the billboard kind of persona that's sharing that. But you can do way more transactions by them by sharing the stories and the journey of people that you help, whether you're that solo entrepreneur selling real estate or you're a $20 million SaaS company. And it's like you need to really shift in that place about what were the problems they were trying to solve, make the actual decision makers the superhero, not you. And by that, not only are you more likely to kind of actually get better sales with ads, but those people are going to go tell your story. I mean, every customer, any CMO that buys your marketing software, like they're going to want to tell the story about them being successful. So that's the stories you should be telling.
Absolutely. I point at this often for third-party validation, social proof. People don't believe what they see on the internet. And the more times they hear the same information, but from different sources, the more they believe it. And you're talking about influence, you're talking about taking your customers into that initiative for you. Whether it's establishing that validation, that authority in your space, or getting your customers to then influence future customers. What processes do you typically look at to have more relationships, bringing in your dream customers, using those customers to bring on more and establish both authority and influence for the market? What approaches have you made or recommended to establish either?
Yeah, great question. I think, it's it may sound a little like, I don't know, a little bit not too exciting, but I think one of the best ways that I think especially for the leaders of the company, whether you're the CEO or you're the head of marketing, or you're just a content writer, is you have to remember that your potential customers, they don't know what you know. And even if they do know what you know, they're busy with so many different things in their lives right And so the process that I actually think is really helpful to go through, especially with marketing today, whether it's, hey, you can turn a knob or a knob right now and go spend $100,000 a week on advertising, or you can set up marketing automation with HubSpot and go email 100,000 people. Heck, I was working with my product marketer. We sent out an email to 75,000 real estate agents on Tuesday. We came up with the messaging a couple of hours beforehand. 75,000 people got an email. That's also wonderfully powerful, but should just scare the shit out of people as well. And so I think the process that every leader needs to take is, for me, I have to do this physically. I think there's a place where you can say, yeah, I know my customers don't know what I know, but I actually have to put on my glasses, or sometimes I'll have a hat by usually almost every desk that I sit at. And so I have a separate house that's out, a tree house that's 25 foot off the ground where I normally work from. So I have a hat there where I literally, if I'm reviewing content or I'm thinking about the messaging I want to do, I put on the hat just so I have the physical reminder. And I will say, I know nothing about what I'm about to read. I know nothing about the video I'm going to watch my team has put together. And what do I think? And that actual simple, what seemingly simple process will change your marketing entirely. Like, hey, you have a message, your company's been growing. And when you go through that process and you actually remind yourself, my customers, if I'm remarketing to current customers or potential customers that have never heard the message, and you take a step of forgetting everything that you know about being in your business every day, and you go read that email and you'll go, this is a horrible email. It's way too selly, or it's selling the wrong thing. It's positioning the wrong thing. And that process, when you should let that permeate every part of your business, and you should empower your team to do that review as well, especially if you're the CMO, if you're the CEO and you wrote the message. If you went to them and said, hey, you went to your agency and said, here's the video I think we need. Here's 30 grand, go produce this video. You should empower that agency or your internal team that knows you did that and say, I need you to go through this process and tell me what your perception is. Because if it was your message as the leader, others don't want to give you bad news. And so no matter how many, you have to give them every step along the way, say, I need you to review this and tell me, like, give me the good, bad, and the ugly. Don't give me, like, what happens when the 7-year-old comes into their mom or dad and says, hey, I made this mud pie. Do you want this mud pie? Well, yes, you do. Your 7-year-old went and made this for you. Well, that's what your team feels like, that 30 years of marketing experience when you came with an idea. You need to be like, no, I need you to say, this is a mud pie. Nobody's going to buy this. Mama loves it. I don't.
Absolutely. And I like how you point out you need to get in the shoes of the target audience. 20-foot treehouse, I think that's a great place to do it. I used to be part of this creative agency. We do blue sky meetings in remote locations, and great things would come out of it because you're undistracted. You're there and thinking on how to better the process. But we like to build out target audience personas in the strategy process, and even give them names, a whole fictional storyline, so we could say, Steven would never click on that ad. Or why would Kristen, move forward on this campaign? There's nothing compelling there. So I like how you're pointing that out and really trying to set it up. I also say, we have assumptions going into any campaign, but we really need the data to show us what's working. So once you have that to a good point, and you've tested with your team, you've tested outside your team, you take it to the marketplace. I often look at advertising, social advertising metrics. I mean, Meta can be a great place to market test, if nothing else, and be able to see, hey, these audiences, this is the response, these audiences, here's the actual conversion, and being able to, shift towards pockets of performance versus just going off what we think sounds good or works. We've even put together some of these focus groups, kind of like that closed loop system. We do a lot of investor marketing campaigns. Let's not just pretend we know what an investor wants to hear and see, because we have an idea, but those are just generalizations. Let's ask them. Let's talk to 10. Let's talk to more. Let's get their feedback. They're going to start pointing out things on the offering that you think are pretty. Everyone thinks their baby's cute, right? But that they can show need improvement.
Yeah, I love that. You had something in there, which is another step of my process that it's in there, but I just do it naturally, and I don't always think about it as well. As you mentioned, those hidden those assumptions. And so another step that I end up doing is I document the hidden, and I ask people, especially if I'm doing those client interviews, I'm going out and talking to them, but I'm asking my team, what are the assumption? What are you assuming? What hidden assumption do you have about this?
Mm.
Before we get into that. And so like, especially like on the crowdfunding perspective, my wife and I, we're going to probably go by this year. One of the more powerful, I think, crowdfunding things was the Flow Hive, about this ability to be able to go out and anybody can be a beekeeper, but nobody wants to deal with bees. Well, in their initial video, there's this hidden assumption that they had identified from people, not just how it worked and how it was different than other beehives, but they identified most people were scared of, I'm going to get stung by bees. And they identified that, and they came up to realize, look, actually, no, not only do people that have, anybody who raises bees realize you can just walk up to the hives and work with them, but they needed to bring that up to the average person. And so my wife and I had that belief, and we didn't even realize it. And it was kind of addressed in their initial video that went viral. That was like, no, like, that's not something you need to be concerned about. You'll learn about it. There are times that bees would attack you, but that's not normal. And they showed people just walking up to the flow hive with a cup, and they would turn it, and then they would walk away with honey. And my wife and I were like, oh my gosh, we actually called a friend who has hives, and we were like, is that real? They were like, I don't know what the flow hive thing is, but yes, we just go out and pull out a section of the hive. And we're like, that was assumption that they found a way to overcome up front. And that happens in every part of marketing, whether you're selling luxury cabins or whether or not you're selling, marketing technology from software. And that's another step of my process where, as I'm reviewing, I'm looking at those personas. And to your example, Steve, would Steve click on this? Well, what does Steve believe about his life that would make him click or not click on this?
Yes. Yes. And it really does come from the models, the leadership. I know this is something you speak to a lot, and whether it is pertaining to marketing or just overall growth, I know you've been a part of all these companies that have been built up and acquired and, success to point at. And one of the things you like to speak about is high achieving servant leadership. Words that I don't always hear broken down in that exact fashion, but you talk about it as a unique combination, it drives success, and how thinking like a servant can drive gigantic results. Can you speak a little bit about that and how you've been able to scale companies with this philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start by defining servant leadership, because I think a lot of times people will take the approach, and I think there's kind of two paths. There's an authoritative leadership. That's the boss that comes in and tells you exactly what to do, usually
Mm-hmm.
how to do it. And at the underlying, if you don't do this, Jason, I'm going to fire you. Whether or not it's explicit, that's what's below. But now we also perform on the other side. And the servant says, look, the best way I can grow my company, the best way I can meet the customer's needs is by actually trying to serve my team better. And
Mm.
so we still want growth, but that's the difference between kind of the two main leadership styles. But most times when people look at servant leadership, you read these books, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they come at this from almost a moral perspective, sometimes a faith perspective. The reason you should treat your employees is because morally it's the best way to do that. And I believe that, but the data that I've seen by growing companies says, yeah, but the reason I want to actually serve my employees, not just because I believe I should treat people that way, but I want to grow companies. And in a Thorocratic style, you can't scale a business. If I'm coming in from a marketing director, from a CEO's perspective, and I tell you, this is what you should think, Jason, this is what you need to do, I can't be in all of those micro decisions and even mid-level decisions that take place when designing an ad. From the servant leader says, look, there are times and I need to step in and say, Jason, you missed the mark, or here's what I want. But the servant leader trying to reach that high achieving, I'm going to step in and say, hey, let's go design the campaign together. I
Mm.
saw what you did, and I'm not just going to go and do it. I'm going to come in and now say, let's redesign this together, because I'm wanting to train you. I'm wanting to serve you to make you better at your job, so that next time you actually are thinking more like how I would like you to think. And so I'm approaching it every time and saying, look, I'm trying to replicate myself. I tend to be an operations person. I'm going to step in whatever department I'm in, and I'm going to look and say, look, is there a way that I could do this better? If it's 5%, 10%, I'm probably not going to speak up, because I don't want a 5% or 10% improvement. And you'll figure that out as we're trying to get outcomes. I think I can make a 50% improvement, a 90% improvement. I need to step in and I need to carve out time to actually say, let's go do this together. There's a much better way in my experience to do this. And as you mentioned, data, sometimes that is, don't be scared about the ads. Go create a bunch of stuff, put it in there. Let's go see what the results are and come back in 2 days and look at the data and then talk through those results with people so that the second time, the third time, the 12th time, you don't need to be in the room anymore. You've trained them, you've served them to become better so that they'll make those decisions themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We had a TEDx speaker on the show who has a model called I do, we do, you do, where he
Yep.
trains team members by allowing them to be part of a meeting, part of a process, and watch him, take notes. Then the next week, the next month, they do it together. We do it. And then the following week, he's more in the background.
Right.
You do, and they're to answer any questions, they're to support, they're to fill in the blanks. But that's what I'm hearing a little bit when it's the servant mentality and hey, let's do this together. I'm going to support. I know that resonates well with my team. I know it resonates with our clients. Sometimes we'll have different things clients need to take on, and we'll offer to be virtual, be in person with them, and make sure it's all set up. We're a team. We're getting this done. I definitely find it to be more empowering to give team members more purpose as well too. I find it so difficult in this digital era. And you hear things such as quiet quitting, and just team members that aren't fully enrolled. And I think that starts with leadership. So having this type of mentality, having this type of culture of we're doing this together, especially with remote teams, different marketing tools being used in that. Who knows what's going on where? By having a focus on a high achieving servant leadership, you're actually tapping into what team members are doing, and setting up those processes to replicate where you guys have seen success, but as the business is growing.
Absolutely. Well, and there is always that proactive bit, and there should be, whether the I do, we do, you do. But it's like after you did that, and it was 2 years ago that you kind of trained the team. How do you set it up so that that person that you trained how to do it, a good while ago, still feels comfortable coming back to you, or feels comfortable with you stepping in and go, yeah, I know you've been doing this for 2 years since we showed you how to do it, but this one was a fail, or this could be just way better. And that comes from, as a servant leader, like being much more transparent about your own weaknesses and where you fail yourself. And that's not something that your team can actually pull out of you. And so it does take, hey, I've been putting off doing this, even though I'm saying this is important, and telling your team why. One, telling them like where you failed in some stuff, but then the underlying things. Very often, for myself and others, the reason we put off stuff is because we're scared. Nobody hears that from leadership today. So part of servant leadership is letting people know, one, like, hey, I haven't been doing this, and there's fear underlying it, or I did this, I made this decision, and it was the wrong decision. And so we know that, and a lot of times at our leadership, at our agencies or companies, the other leaders may hear it, but your rank and file need to hear that as well. We made this decision. We thought it was right at the time. It wasn't. We realize that now, and that's okay. That provides an environment where people feel safe coming back and saying, yeah, I know I've been running customer success for the last 3 years, but I don't know how to respond to this client. Or can you read this draft before I reply to them? Or here's the marketing copy. You need to create that environment. And so part of that is you being proactive, sharing vulnerabilities that most leaders won't share.
You're right. A lot of leaders don't admit to it, let alone share it. And I think it's a topic that isn't addressed in all forums.
Right.
What would you say to that leader that maybe doesn't identify it as being scared, but overwhelmed? Yeah. That is, having some different obstacles, speaking with their team. I've heard terms like imposter syndrome, or just showing up and bringing what the role really requires on a daily basis. What would you say to them in that moment if you were, speaking on a one-to-one?
If it's in that moment and they're about to step up, I'm probably going to tell them much more of the drill sergeant of they just need to get over it, and they need to step in because their team needs them to show up. And that is a key thing. Like, we all show up with some perception. There's a frame that we come to, and others are going to run off of that. And in the very short term, you need to show up for your team. If it's after that or before then, if it keeps coming up, you need to identify, are you really an imposter? Usually not. I mean, there are places, especially from a growth perspective, where I step in where, I mean, the CEO, the president, the CMO that helps get somebody to a certain level, they're just not capable of taking the company to the next level. And so there's nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. I know where I'm really good at and where I'm not. And so you want to tell people, if you think you are an imposter, you need to help figure that out, but you can't figure it out by yourself. And so you either need a coach, or I'm a huge fan of mastermind groups, whether they're formal or informal. You need to have a group of men and women around you that are not in your company usually, but and they don't even have to be in your industry. It's often better if they're not, but they need to be at kind of your level. And so trying for the next things. And you need to be transparent with them. And this is like, you need to commit upfront with them for kind of like, this is a year-long thing. And it almost needs, whether it's personal or work-wise, you need to expose to them. You don't always need to be friends with them. I've been in people with mastermind groups like this where I would not want to have them over for dinner. I wouldn't want my wife and I to, go on a canoe trip with them. But from a mastermind perspective, these people know transparently everything that they need to be able to speak into what my fears are, what my capabilities are. A lot of times we're sharing data as well. So, hey, if you're scared you're the imposter from a CMO perspective, or can you scale your agency? They need to see the numbers behind that, and you need to empower them, and vice versa, to be able to speak in and go, hey, you're actually not an imposter. Here's what I think's going on. And you need to create time for that. And that's really hard for people that are trying to grow, because so often it's like we're in that rat's race of, I just need to hit my numbers. Well, the way you're going to hit your numbers is by carving out time for other people to get you out of that imposter syndrome over time. In some cases, that's giving a positive word. In some cases, it is saying, yeah, you're a business, even if it's a business you 100% own, you need to find somebody to come in and run that for you, because you're not the person to grow that next level. And sometimes an agency will speak that into it, but usually you just want to keep the clients. And so agencies are great for that, actually, because you usually work with clients of all sizes, but still, as the leader, you need to empower people to freely give you that advice.
The channels have to be open, and you're right. If these leaders have gotten the company to where they're at, they're probably not imposters. And surrounding yourself with others in your role can open up, a lot of light, a lot of clarity. I've been part of mastermind groups. I've been part of informal ones with 12 people. I've been part of larger groups, usually some companies, some founders in there that are, much further along, way up here, usually a lot that are that don't have as much traction. And that gives you that confidence of, I do have this, and we do have models, and my numbers, my data, it is strong. What I really need, an evolution in is around this area. And that's what I've found in mastermind groups, is everyone there can add something different to the conversation that they're a master, an expert of. And sometimes it's outside of work, and the way those relationships or whatever it may be show up in your day-to-day decisions. So I've found that everyone has an impact there. And I think these things are so important to talk about. We're away from the revenue conversation. We're away from some of the marketing discussions because of how they actually directly feed into the model, and how that foundation leads into rapid growth. You talk about 10x company growth and inflection points to unlocking that scale. And I believe this is the underlying layer, and what could be missing for organizations that are having trouble with replication and taking things up to the next levels. How do you identify when things are to a good point, when they're able to scale? What have been your steps from there to get a company to more of these 10x numbers, or at least in path to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, great question. For every level, and I do this with myself, I'm always looking at, I think too often leaders, especially as they start growing things, they think that they just need to kind of manage people, that they just need to kind of lead. I think if you want to find scale, you always have to be doing, you always have to be in the ditch digging. There needs to be work that you're doing that you don't think anybody else on the team is capable of. But for myself, what I'm always trying to do is I'm always documenting the work that I'm doing, the processes that I'm following. I'm allowing other people on the team to see the work that's actually on my plate. And I don't always do it as well as I would like. Um, but I'm starting to document the processes of what I'm taking place so that I can hand stuff off. I'm letting people see what's on my personal Trello board that's not on theirs so that my goal is always to try to replicate myself. And so I think that's really from a where can I scale next? It's looking at you have to have that track record. What have I handed off over the last 12 months that I was doing that now I've systematized and I've trained other people and I've given to them? And what am I experimenting with now? I personally there are founders that need to follow EOS, that entrepreneur operating system. There are people that just always live in I'm the mad scientist and I need an operator. And that's okay. But I think if you know yourself, everybody has that mad scientist kind of standpoint. And so what you should be doing is, hey, how do you segment that person? And so trying to build out an inflection point that as soon as you can replicate it, you hand it off to somebody else, and then you go experiment with something else. I do it, I document it. I do a weekly review and quarterly review where I'm looking at, have I done enough of that over the past? And then should actually do another one of these. I'm about 2 months since my last one. I then go back through with my team and I show them, here's where I've been spending my own time. What should I hand off that I'm not? And then you just need to shut up. Like anybody on your team, when you ask that question, you do not push back on them for their feedback. You may ask questions to understand, but your job, you don't have to hand things off, but you need to create the environment where everybody feels very comfortable saying, hey, Kurt, you keep working on this and you're too valuable for that. Like, let us take those drafts and come back to it. Michael on my team does this really well. He says, look, let me take this and you can still review it, but I need to do the grunts work on this part of it. And he's brilliant. But that's a really hard thing for people to step into. Some people by nature will do that, but you need to empower even the quieter people to do that on your team.
And love how you're removing yourself from the process, placing yourself where you can be the most valuable, the most impactful for the business, but removing so that you're not bottlenecking any of the processes that need you, that have to involve you, so you can have different team members doing it and take on more scale over time, whether it's different pods or different teams within the team, whatever it may be. It can be humbling and really trying to figure out where am I the most effective, what do I hand off, but can make all the difference in taking things to the next stage.
Yeah, and in some cases, like you can step in and coach them through that, and you should be doing that if you're skilled in the area. Other places, people will kind of self-create those mastermind groups, as you and I talked about. We both personally love. But I'm also very understanding that like not everybody likes the mastermind. I mean, I had a conversation 2 days ago with a gentleman. He's running about a $10 million agency, and he hates masterminds. Like it's just not his thing. And so he was reaching out, literally, whether it was me or somebody else, like, hey, he's looking for an executive coach to help guide him through that. So happens to have the cost because he's leaving the agency, but you may need to do that for somebody that's on your team as well, saying, look, you don't like doing the masterminds. You may need to help put them in a mastermind themselves. Sometimes those are free. That's my preference. Sometimes you pay for those. Nothing wrong with that. But some people want that other approach. And so you need to just make sure that you're helping level up your people with whatever method they're most comfortable for. And so, hey, the coach model where you're paying somebody for that's a wonderful way to do as well.
I think the coach model is fantastic. I've heard it referred to as cheat codes, being able to find someone who's been down your path and can help you along the way. I know I certainly could for someone who's launching an agency or getting involved in some of the verticals where we've seen strong performance. Having watched directly what works, what doesn't work, and removing some of the pitfalls could be extremely helpful and save huge amounts of time. I do like the mastermind model because we're all working together. Like you said, if it's free, it's great because we all have that shared interest. I've been pitched different paid ones and they sound good as well. I also just have friends that I try to spend time with regularly that are in similar roles. CEOs, one of them golf with every couple weeks. Others, it's different activities. Sometimes just lunch, coffee. It doesn't have to be anything. It could be a call when you have some free time, maybe in that 5 to 7 p.m. or 5 to 7 a.m. window where you're less busy. But being able to share some of the things that come across our desk in a completely open format. Not trying to look good as much as, oh yeah, that happened to us a few years ago. Here's what worked for us. It can be inspiring and can definitely carry that extra, value for you. Now, Kurt, you've been very successful at growing these organizations. Before I get into some questions about Test Optimize Scale, but what is the secret that you wish you could tell founders that, if they had been in your shoes, if they had been along for the ride with you, they would know these things when looking at their own business, looking at their own growth, looking at their own aspirations of hitting 10x. I don't think it's an accident that you've been successful again and again and been able to build these companies up to the point of acquisition, nor in the coaching and the different roles you've been able to fill, and using the processes you mentioned, the servant mentality from the leadership. What is it that you wish you could share and implant into the minds of founders?
Oh, great question. It gets actually into the first part of the next bit about testing.
Yes.
Especially for founders. I can guarantee one thing about your business. I can't guarantee you'll be successful. I can't guarantee where you should spend the money, but I guarantee there are at least 3 things you are fundamentally wrong about in your business today. And so you don't know what those are. And here's the thing that everybody needs to know, and this applies for your relationship with your spouse and partner, it applies at work. How I know that you're wrong about things is being wrong and being right about things feels exactly the same until you actually know that you're wrong. And so from a testing perspective, like there will be a time where you're Wile E. Coyote and you're out off the cliff, the roadrunner's back there, and you realize you've written $1 million in pay-per-click ads, and you realize that like the messaging was just wrong. Well, that happens. If you could have known it before you went off the cliff, that's better. And so what I think everybody needs to get into process for is, and it only take 2 minutes a day. Don't dwell on this because you're not always gonna be able to pick every day, what am I wrong about? But asking yourself, what could I be wrong about today? And looking for that in your data. And so if you could figure out when you're writing consistent checks into an area or you're investing time into something, if you could figure out 6 months or heck, even 3 months earlier before you're going to find out you're wrong about something. But if you could figure out it earlier, you've just compressed the amount of time until you're now on a better path.
Amazing. Obviously, we're from the school of, test, optimize, scale. We could always be improving. But I think asking and looking within of what could I be wrong about? Because that is accurate. I didn't fully realize it till you said it, but being wrong can feel like you're being right until you know that you're wrong. So if you're ahead of the curve there, if you're, bringing out the magnifying glass and trying to figure it out for yourself, you could be in a much better place as a result.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, what are some other things that audiences, founders could test out towards their own model? And I know it's a great test right there. We sometimes talk about it towards marketing, entrepreneurship, but just overall growth. What else could they test out beyond that self-analysis and looking to see what they could be wrong about? What are some other actionable insights we could give listeners around what to test?
Yeah, it's amazing. Like we have with ChatGPT and other AI tools, we have so many new content ways we can come up with saying things. But yet still, when I look into people's software, whether it's on the product side or in their marketing messages, they're not actually using the A/B testing or different messaging. And so, because some of it's that you think you're right. Other sides is when we look at the data, we go, well, unless you're sending out 75,000 emails, and not everybody has lists like that. Like it's hard to get enough visitors to your website to actually get a true definitive, which is a better, verbiage for a button. Like one-sided, two-sided test, the math just is not there on most people's websites to know, is it definitively better? But that doesn't mean you can't be testing those things. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me. And often why I think the companies that are using agencies that are usually better at some of the technology, but the reason that they tend to do better is because they're testing more copy, not just on their website, not just in their messaging, but they need somebody to implement that and push back and say, well, yeah, you think this is a good subject line, or you think this is the way you should be pushing this, but they're not actually testing big things like that, like messaging for what's the header, what should be the header on your websites. And they're not changing those things out and using what are really simple tools to use. You just need to actually do it.
It's out there. You got to actually do it. Let the metrics show you. Well, what about when things aren't working? We like to go to audiences, messaging, funnels, have those variants like you're mentioning, those A/B tests, and always have something new that we're rolling out. What do you look towards when it's not working? Maybe it is around what we could be wrong about, and we've addressed that, and now we want to optimize it. Maybe it's marketing tactics, growth tactics that aren't working right out of the gate. I find this is the difference from the companies that lead a vertical and have market share and those that never fully get off the ground or past that, let's just say $100 million mark, what have you. What are the best mindsets? What are the best systems towards optimization?
For me, I think that it's part of it's unlocking like where you're missing the boat as well. Is it's going to customers that have fired you, and that could mean a firm firing for not renewing, or it could just mean that they kind of quietly go away. If you're a real estate agent, as we talked about, you're not in that $100 million range, but you help somebody buy or sell a house. They're really happy. Maybe you help them buy or sell a couple properties, and then you saw that they did a transaction without you.
Sure.
Well, it's actually reaching out to those people and not doing the typical kind of call that people do, where, especially on the revenue side, you're calling and there's almost always, if when I get those calls, they're actually trying to soft sell me back in again. Like, and I put up my guard on that. That's like, I'm not going to expose it that much, because like, I know you're trying to get me to come back to your agency on that. And it's like, well, I fired you for a reason. Like, I'm going to take this call to be sold. What, especially on past clients or people that you really believed were your perfect client, but just never respond to things. Those people you actually usually have to pay to get them on the phone for something. And so I want to have conversations with those people to find out why they didn't choose me again, or why they didn't take the calls. I wrote this email, you should be perfect. Like, it's worth $100 Amazon card to send a note to have 10 minutes with somebody to say, you're my perfect client. What happened? I remember back in the day, like even with GCP, when at the time, because I had different companies, I could take a 30-minute call with the salesperson, even on the sales side, and they would send me a free Chromebook, like just for taking a call. So since I was on so many different boards, I don't know how many I gave away for Christmas at time, because I just keep taking the calls for different companies. It's that same type of thing where when you may have to pay for the information, but you need to find out really why people are not choosing you. That's from really an optimize. The best places for optimize, the data is going to show when your things are working well. And then when the pay-per-click's going well, the ads are going well, the messaging, the product usage, the data is really easy. Double down on those things. That's wonderful. But if you want to have that inflection point, you need to find out why things are not being used, why people are not choosing you, why people stop choosing you. And from an optimize, we tend to focus so much on what's going well that which is okay, and that's how you're going to get a 2%, a 5%, a 20% growth. But if you want to get a 200% growth, you need to go find out how to make the pie bigger. And to do that, you need to stop selling for those conversations. You already have product market fit, you think, and maybe you do, and your messaging just completely off. Okay, how do you uncover that? The optimizing comes from talking with people that are not choosing you. And so in that case, you're trying to expand the pie, not just grow it a little bit.
Talk to the people who are not choosing to you. Speaking about going at that larger pie, once you've optimized it to a point where it's working, your message is resonating, it's showing up in terms of performance. What are some more tips? And you've already gave great fundamentals on scale, but what are some more tips that you could provide, or examples towards scale of taking things from a level of effectiveness to much higher multiples?
Yeah, I end up trying to teach from a tip perspective. this concept called net weaving to everybody on my team, whether they're leading customer success or they're on the sales side or marketing. And so like we're all kind of used to, and I say that because if I'm trying to replicate myself, I'm hiring wise people. I'm hiring people that are good at what they're doing. Especially from the sales side, we want to get more clients out there. But I want people, I want them growing themselves, but I want them growing the company. And networking at some level always feels very self-serving. We've all had this experience. You meet somebody out at an event, you're at a conference, and they get your business card, and you can almost watch them make the decision that says, Kurt can't help me. And they fix in their mind, they throw the business card over their shoulder because you'll never hear from that person again. You reach out to them, they're not calling you back. The net weaver ends up taking the approach that's much different, that says, look, I'm always looking for how I can help other people. It's so rare, especially in remote companies today, to actually spend time with people and go, look, there are times, I look at your background, Jason, and what you all have been able to do. I know that you could take 10 minutes to make a real introduction for somebody that you all will never get a new client, but it could completely change that company's trajectory just by you making an introduction to solve one problem that they're having right then. Well, that's what net weaving looks like. Going, look, it takes 10 minutes of your time. You're not going to get paid from it. Your head of customer success, that's your account management team, they're not going to get success from helping their client with something that's not at all related to the agency. But it's empowering them from a team perspective, saying, I'll pay them to actually do some of that net weaving, but teaching them what that looks like in their personal lives. Because from a tips perspective, one, when you allow, like, say, somebody at your agency and you say, look, like, yeah, you're running a book of business for existing clients. I want you to take 2 or 3 hours every week that does nothing but look for ways to help the clients with business that's not from the agency. Well, that person will do that in their personal life as well. Well, those clients will come back and refer clients to you, being like, yeah, Susie on the team, she did this for me. And there was no self-serving, there was no trying to get business. It was just, she made introductions to just help solve a problem for that client and make connections. And you end up becoming a trusted resource, not just you, but everybody within your organization. That ends up coming back, helping them in their personal business. But I mean, when you do that for 2 months, you see a little bit of growth. When you have everybody on your team start doing that for 6 months, your opportunities come not just for how does that, say, account manager become better in their own business. That's how masterminds happen by nature. By other people go, they introduce the account manager, somebody that should be in a mastermind with them. But your clients, people that were never going to be clients, and you met them at church and they're doing a book, and you go, you know what, I have a ghostwriter you should probably reach. Like, they do this is exactly what you make that connection, they'll bring clients to you.
Peer-to-peer marketing, word of mouth, ultimate marketing in our eyes, getting team members to do it, even the ones who are not in business development or, in the marketing team whatsoever. I like how you pointed that out. It gets them trained to have those conversations in their day-to-day, and especially if they're incentivized. And then it goes into whole new streams of growth, new biz, everything that's occurring. Kurt, it's so great to hear about these tactics. It validates some of the things we've talked about on the podcast before. It brings new topics, new ways of thinking. What can I be doing that's wrong? Who can I speak to that told us no, and that we could really learn from, that actually have not been addressed in our 120 plus episodes. And not hearing this as, hey, this is a college 101 course, as much as this is what you're doing to grow businesses, to these massive levels. This is what's physically working. It means that much more. So I want to thank you for taking the time to hop on and have this conversation with us today. As we begin to wrap things up, want to ask you about final thoughts, final notes you want to leave listeners with, and the best place for the audience to go if they want to get more information on you, everything that you're involved in. Where should they find you online?
Yeah, great question. So I love just the title of even your podcast, and I mean the the testing, optimizing, and growing. I do that by nature because of the data will lead you to the correct path.
Yes.
I found scaling because after that you have to do things that look at replicating yourself, and so I try writing a lot about that. I've turned down a couple book deals. At this point, I'm giving away just a ton of information on my own website at Kurt Uhlir, uhlir.com, including we talked a little bit about net weaving versus networking. Got a free ebook that gives people a way, like a guide on how to actually do that and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis. And so people can always come out and find me on my own website.
There you go. And highly recommend that you do. I think that's a kind offer. I've been to the site. It's got a lot of info for you. Kurt, thanks again. Appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you brought to the pod today. Want to thank listeners as well. We will see everybody next time. Take care.
Especially for founders. I can guarantee one thing about your business. I can't guarantee you'll be successful. I can't guarantee where you should spend the money, but I guarantee there are at least 3 things you are fundamentally wrong about in your business today.